Ethan Sinclair, a billionaire single father, never imagined a car accident would change his life. When he fell into a coma, a kind-hearted nanny, Naomi, stepped in to care for his son. Everyone doubted her, but when Ethan woke up, the truth about love, loyalty, and family changed everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Ethan Sinclair surveyed the Manhattan skyline from his penthouse office on the 50th floor. At 42, he had everything a man could want: a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, respect from competitors, and a 6-year-old son who was his world. The only thing missing was someone to share it with. "Mr. Sinclair, your 2 o'clock appointment is here," his assistant announced through the intercom. "Send her in," Ethan replied, straightening his tie. The door opened, and a young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and kind eyes entered. She wore a simple blue dress and minimal makeup, standing out from the usual parade of designer outfits that passed through his office. "Mr. Sinclair, I'm Naomi Carter. Thank you for seeing me." Ethan gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit down. Your references are impressive." "Thank you. I've been working with children for 8 years now. I have my degree in early childhood education." Ethan nodded, studying her resume. "And what brings you to apply for this position? Being a live-in nanny for a single father isn't exactly what most young women dream of." Naomi smiled. "I believe every child deserves someone who puts them first. From what I understand, your son, Oliver, needs stability right now." "Yes," Ethan said, his expression softening at the mention of his son. Since his mother left when he was 3, it's been a revolving door of nannies, none of them connected with him. "Children can sense insincerity," Naomi said. "I promise you, Mr. Sinclair, if you hire me, Oliver will always come first." Something about her straightforward honesty appealed to Ethan. Too many people in his life said what they thought he wanted to hear. This woman seemed different. "When can you start?" "Immediately." "Good, my assistant will show you to your quarters." As she turned to leave, Ethan added, "Miss Carter, Oliver can be challenging. He's used to people leaving." Naomi's gaze was steady. "I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Sinclair." 2 weeks later, Naomi had transformed Oliver's world. The sullen, distrustful child was now laughing as he chased her through the mansion's garden. "You can't catch me," Naomi called, deliberately slowing her pace. Oliver's giggles filled the air as his small legs pumped harder. "Got you!" he shouted triumphantly as he tagged her. From his home office window, Ethan watched the scene with amazement. His son, his serious, often sad little boy, was playing like a normal child. His phone rang, pulling him from the moment. "Ethan Sinclair." "Ethan, it's Marcus. The board meeting starts in an hour. Where are you?" "Working from home today. I'll drive in now," Ethan replied, reluctantly turning from the window. He grabbed his keys and headed downstairs. In the kitchen, he found Naomi helping Oliver with a science project, the table covered with colored paper and glue. "I have to go to the office," Ethan announced. Oliver's face fell immediately. "You promised we'd finish my solar system today." "I know, buddy, but this meeting is important. We'll do it tomorrow." "You always say that," Oliver mumbled, looking down at his half-finished project. Naomi spoke gently. "Your dad has an important job, Oliver, but maybe he could see what you've done so far." Ethan checked his watch but nodded. "Show me what you've got, champ." Oliver's face brightened as he proudly displayed the planets he'd created. "See, Ms. Naomi helped me make Earth just the right size?" Ethan smiled, genuinely impressed. "That's fantastic work, Oliver." "Mr. Sinclair," Naomi said, "if you'd like, I could take a photo of the finished project and send it to you later." "I'd like that," Ethan replied, surprised by her thoughtfulness. As he headed for the door, he heard Oliver ask, "Will he really look at the picture, Ms. Naomi?" "I think he will," she answered. "Your dad loves you very much, Oliver." "Sometimes grown-ups just have a hard time showing it." Ethan paused, struck by her words and the gentle way she spoke to his son. No nanny had ever cared enough to explain his absences to Oliver before. The board meeting dragged on for hours. Ethan's thoughts kept drifting back to his son and the solar system project. When his phone buzzed with a message from Naomi, he discreetly checked it under the table. The photo showed a beaming Oliver next to his completed solar system. The caption read, Houston, we have liftoff. Oliver is so proud. He can't wait to tell you all about it. Something warm unfurled in Ethan's chest. He typed back a quick reply. Tell him it's the best solar system I've ever seen. I'll be home for dinner. His CFO, James Wilson, noticed his smile. Good news. Just checking in on my son, Ethan replied, tucking his phone away. James raised an eyebrow. The new nanny working out? Surprisingly well. Oliver actually seems happy. Just be careful, James cautioned. Women like that always have an angle. Single billionaire, adorable son. I'm sure she sees dollar signs. Ethan frowned. Naomi's not like that. They never seem like that at first, James said with a knowing smirk. Remember your ex-wife? Ethan's expression hardened. Let's focus on business, shall we? That evening, Ethan made it home in time for dinner, something he rarely managed. He found Oliver and Naomi in the kitchen, making spaghetti together. Daddy? Oliver ran to him, arms outstretched. We're cooking. Ethan lifted his son, surprised by the enthusiastic greeting. I can see that. It smells delicious. Ms. Naomi let me stir the sauce, and I helped with the garlic bread too. Naomi smiled from the stove. Oliver is quite the chef. He measured all the ingredients perfectly. I didn't know you could cook, Ethan said, setting Oliver down. My mom taught me, Naomi replied. I thought Oliver might enjoy learning. There's something special about making a meal together. So Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a home-cooked meal in this kitchen. His previous nannies had always ordered in or had the housekeeper prepare something. Dinner was a revelation. Oliver chatted excitedly about his day, his school, project, and his newfound interest in astronomy. Ethan found himself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of a family meal. As Naomi cleared the plates, Oliver yawned widely. Bedtime for you, young man, she said. Can Daddy read my story tonight? Oliver asked hopefully. Ethan hesitated. He had emails to answer, calls to return. Naomi smiled encouragingly. I'm sure your dad would love to. I'll clean up here. Put on the spot. Ethan nodded. Of course I'll read your story, buddy. Oliver's delighted smile was worth every unanswered email. Later, after tucking his son in, Ethan found Naomi in the kitchen, finishing the dishes. You don't have to do that, he said. That's what the housekeeper is for. Naomi shrugged. I don't mind. It's nice to leave things tidy. Thank you, Ethan said awkwardly. For dinner, and for everything with Oliver. He seems happier than I've seen him in years. He's a wonderful boy, Mr. Sinclair. He just needs people who won't let him down. Her words stung with unintended truth. How many times had Ethan himself let Oliver down? Missed school events, forgotten promises, prioritized work over his son? I'm trying, he admitted quietly. Naomi's expression softened. I know you are. And so does Oliver. As she turned to leave, Ethan asked, Why did you take this job, Miss Carter? You're clearly overqualified to be a nanny. She paused in the doorway. Sometimes life doesn't go as planned, Mr. Sinclair. I was engaged once, planning to start a family of my own. When that fell apart, I realized I still wanted to make a difference in children's lives. Oliver needed someone. I needed a purpose. Sometimes it's that simple. With that, she left him alone with his thoughts. The next few weeks settled into a comfortable routine. For the first time since his divorce, Ethan's house felt like a home. He found himself looking forward to returning from work, to hearing Oliver's excited chatter, and seeing Naomi's warm smile. His brother, Victor, noticed the change during his monthly visit to discuss family investments. You seem different, Victor observed as they sat in Ethan's study. More relaxed, Ethan shrugged. Maybe I'm finally finding some balance. Or maybe it's the pretty nanny, Victor suggested with a smirk. Oliver can't stop talking about her. Naomi is good at her job, Ethan said firmly. That's all. Victor raised his hands in mock surrender. Hey, no judgment here. God knows you deserve some happiness after what Diane put you through. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. It was James from the office. Ethan, we need you here. The Taylor merger is falling apart. Their CEO is threatening to walk. I'll be there in 20, Ethan replied, already reaching for his jacket. He found Naomi and Oliver in the playroom, building an elaborate fort out of blankets and chairs. "I have to go to the office," he announced. "Emergency meeting." Oliver's face crumpled. "But you promised we'd finish the fort and watch a movie." "I know, buddy, and I'm sorry. This is really important. More important than me." Oliver's lower lip trembled. Ethan looked helplessly at Naomi, who stepped in smoothly. "Your dad has to help a lot of people at his company, Oliver. But how about this? We'll finish the fort, and when your dad gets home, no matter how late, we'll all have a special fort sleepover." Oliver considered this compromise. "Promise, Daddy?" Ethan nodded gratefully. "I promise, champ, and I'll bring home ice cream." As he headed for the door, Naomi followed him into the hallway. "Mr. Sinclair, I hope you don't mind me stepping in like that. I just hate seeing him disappointed." "No, I appreciate it. You're good with him, better than I am sometimes." "That's not true," Naomi said firmly. "You're his hero. He talks about you all the time." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. "I don't deserve his admiration. I'm hardly ever here." "Then maybe that's something you can change," she suggested gently. "Time is the one thing money can't buy back, Mr. Sinclair." Her words stayed with him as he drove to the office, a strange uneasiness settling in his chest. The emergency took hours to resolve. By the time Ethan headed home, it was past midnight. He expected to find the house dark, everyone asleep. Instead, a soft light glowed from the living room. There, under a canopy of blankets, Naomi sat reading a book. Oliver was curled up asleep beside her. "You waited up," Ethan said quietly, setting down the bag of ice cream he'd remembered to pick up. Naomi smiled. "We promised a fort sleepover. He tried to stay awake for you, but—" "Thank you," Ethan said, genuinely moved. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but promises matter to children." Ethan gazed at his sleeping son, overcome with a strange mixture of gratitude and regret. "You're teaching me how to be a better father, Ms. Carter." "Naomi," she corrected, gently. "And you're already a good father, Mr. Sinclair. You just need to believe it." "Ethan," he replied with a small smile, "if we're having a sleepover in a blanket fort, I think we can use first names." They shared a moment of quiet understanding, something shifting between them. Not romance, not yet, but a foundation of respect and shared purpose. "There's room for you," Naomi said, gesturing to the fort. "Oliver would be thrilled to wake up and find you here." Ethan hesitated only briefly before crawling into the fort, settling on the other side of his son. Oliver stirred in his sleep, instinctively curling closer to his father. As Ethan drifted off to sleep, he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this peaceful. The next morning, Ethan woke to Oliver's excited voice. "Daddy! You stayed in the fort, I promised, didn't I?" Ethan said, stretching. His phone buzzed with a message. Victor had texted, "Emergency board meeting called 9 a.m. Henderson making a move against you." Ethan sighed, the real world intruding once. Again. "I have to go to work, buddy." "But it's Saturday," Oliver protested. "I know, but this is important." Naomi appeared in the doorway, already dressed. "Breakfast is ready, Oliver. Why don't you go wash your hands?" Once Oliver was out of earshot, she turned to Ethan. "Is everything okay?" "Just business politics, nothing I can't handle." He hesitated, then added, "I might be late again today." Naomi nodded. "We'll be here. But Ethan, remember what we talked about. Time is precious." "I know," he said, feeling the weight of her words. "This is the last time, I promise. After today, I'm going to make some changes." Naomi smiled, a warmth in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. Oliver will be so happy to hear that. The board. Meeting was every bit as contentious as Ethan had expected. Richard Henderson, his largest investor, was making a power play, trying to force Ethan into selling his newest technology. "The bid from Nextech is too good to pass up," Henderson argued. $30 billion. "It's worth more," Ethan insisted. "And I didn't spend 5 years developing this tech just to hand it to our biggest competitor." James backed him up. "Ethan's right. If we hold out, we could double that valuation within 2 years. Henderson's face reddened. "You're letting ego cloud your judgment, Sinclair. Take the money and run." "This meeting is over," Ethan said firmly. "No vote today. I need time to prepare a proper counter-proposal." As the board members filed out, James lingered. Henderson won't back down easily. He's got 3 other board members in his pocket. Let me worry about Henderson, Ethan replied. I'm going home to spend the weekend with my son. James looked surprised. Since when do you take weekends off? Since now, Ethan said, feeling lighter with the decision. The company will survive without me for 2 days. As Ethan arrived home to find Oliver and Naomi in the backyard, planting flowers in the garden that had been neglected for years. Daddy, Oliver shouted, running to him with muddy hands. You came back early. I promised things would. Change, didn't I? Ethan hugged his son, not caring about the dirt on his expensive suit. What are you 2 up to? Miss Naomi says every home needs flowers, Oliver explained seriously. We're planting sunflowers because they're happy flowers. Naomi stood up, brushing soil from her jeans. I hope you don't mind. Oliver mentioned his mother used to garden. Here? I don't mind at all, Ethan said softly. It's good to bring life back to this place. He rolled up his sleeves and joined them, feeling a strange sense of homecoming as he dug his hands into the warm earth. Later, as the 3 of them sat on the patio eating sandwiches, Ethan's phone rang. Henderson's name flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan silenced it and put the phone away. Naomi noticed but said nothing, just smiled and passed him the lemonade. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Ethan found Naomi on the patio, gazing at the stars. Thank you, he said, sitting beside her, for helping me remember what's important. You would have figured it out eventually, she replied. You love your son. Yes, but I was losing him, wasn't I? Before you came. Naomi turned to face him, her expression serious. It's never too late to change course, Ethan. That's the beautiful thing about life. Something about the moonlight, the quiet night and her gentle wisdom made Ethan lean closer. For a moment he thought he might kiss her. For a moment he thought she might let him. Instead, he simply said, I'm glad you're here, Naomi. So am I, she replied softly. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. Something neither was ready to name. Monday morning arrived with a clear blue sky and a sense of promise. Ethan had spent the entire weekend with Fee, Oliver and Naomi, building memories he would always cherish. I have meetings until 3, but I'll be home for dinner, he told Oliver over breakfast. Can we play baseball after? Oliver asked hopefully. Absolutely, Ethan promised, ruffling his son's hair. Naomi watched the exchange with a smile. I'll have his homework done by the time you get back. As Ethan headed for the garage, Naomi followed with his forgotten briefcase. Have a good day, she said, handing it to him. You've changed everything, Ethan said suddenly. You know that, right? Naomi blushed slightly. Oliver did all the hard work. He just needed someone to see him. So did I, Ethan admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Their eyes met, a current of unspoken feelings passing between them. Then Ethan's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. I should go, he said reluctantly. We'll be here when you get back, Naomi assured him. Ethan nodded, getting into his car. As he pulled out of the driveway, he watched Naomi in his rearview mirror, standing in the doorway with the morning sunlight framing her. For the first time in years, he was genuinely looking forward to coming home. The traffic was light as he headed toward downtown. Ethan found himself humming along to the radio, thinking about playing baseball with Oliver later. Maybe they could grill dinner outside. Maybe Naomi would join them, her laughter blending with Oliver's in the evening air. He was so lost in these pleasant thoughts that he didn't notice the delivery truck, running the red light until it was too late. The impact was deafening. Metal crunched against metal as Ethan's world spun violently. There was pain, sharp and overwhelming, then darkness closing in from all sides. His last conscious thought was of Oliver and Naomi, waiting for him to come home. Then nothing. The hospital corridor was blindingly white. Naomi held Oliver's small hand tightly as they followed the solemn-faced doctor toward the intensive care unit. I want to prepare you, the doctor was saying gently. Mr. Sinclair has sustained severe injuries. He's in a coma, and there's significant brain swelling. But he'll wake up, right? Oliver's voice was small, frightened. The doctor knelt to Oliver's level. We're doing everything we can to help your dad, Oliver. He's fighting very hard. Naomi felt numb with shock. Just hours ago, Ethan had been smiling, full of life and plans for the future. Now he lay broken, suspended between life and death. "Can I see him?" Oliver whispered. "Of course," the doctor said, "but he won't be able to respond to you right now." As they entered the room, Naomi had to stifle a gasp. Ethan was nearly unrecognizable, his face swollen and bruised, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. Oliver stopped in the doorway, his eyes wide with fear. "Daddy?" Naomi knelt beside him. "Remember what the doctor said. Your dad can't answer right now, but some people think that coma patients can still hear. You can talk to him if you want to." Oliver approached the bed cautiously. "Daddy, it's me. Oliver, please wake up. We were going to play baseball, remember? You promised." His small hand reached out to touch his father's bandaged one. "I'm not mad that you broke your promise. Just please wake up." Naomi felt her heart breaking as she watched the little boy try to be brave. When Oliver began to cry, she wrapped her arms around him, her own tears falling freely. "I've got you," she whispered. "And we've got your dad. We're not going anywhere." Outside in the hallway, hospital staff exchanged sympathetic glances as they watched the nanny comfort the sobbing child. None of them held much hope for Ethan. Sinclair's recovery. The prognosis was grim, but they didn't know Naomi Carter, and they didn't know that she had made a promise to both Sinclair men. She wasn't going anywhere. The days following Ethan's accident blurred together in a haze of hospital visits, hushed conversations, and Oliver's tearful questions. Naomi barely slept, dividing her time between comforting the frightened boy and sitting beside Ethan's hospital bed. On the third day, as Naomi dozed in the uncomfortable chair next to Ethan's bed, a sharp voice jolted her awake. "Who exactly are you? And why are you here?" A tall, elegant woman with Ethan's blue eyes stood in the doorway, her designer suit unwrinkled, despite the long flight she'd mentioned to the nurses. Victor Sinclair stood beside her, looking uncomfortable. "Mother, this is Naomi Carter," Victor explained. "Oliver's nanny." "I'm Elaine Sinclair," the woman said, giving Naomi a cold once-over. "Ethan's mother, and you have no business being here, family only." Naomi stood, straightening her rumpled clothes. "I understand, but Oliver needs familiar faces right now. He's very upset about his father." "Oliver is my grandson. I'll handle his care," Elaine said dismissively. "You can return to the house and pack your things." "Pack my things?" Naomi echoed in confusion. Victor cleared his throat. "Mother thinks it's best if Oliver comes to stay with her in Boston while Ethan recovers. The nanny services won't be needed." "But Oliver needs stability right now," Naomi protested. "His whole world has been turned upside down, taking him away from his home, his school, his friends." "I don't recall asking for your opinion," Elaine cut in. "You're an employee, Miss Carter, not family." The word stung, but Naomi thought only of Oliver. "Please, at least let me explain to him what's happening. He trusts me." Elaine's expression remained unmoved. "Very well. You may say your goodbyes. Today. I'll be collecting Oliver tomorrow morning." After they left, Naomi sank back into the chair, fighting tears. She took Ethan's limp hand in hers. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I promised I wouldn't leave Oliver, but they're not giving me a choice. What should I do, Ethan?" Of course, there was no response. When Naomi returned to the Sinclair mansion that evening, she found Oliver waiting anxiously by the window. He ran to her the moment she entered. "How's Daddy? Is he awake yet?" Naomi knelt to his level, taking his small hands in hers. "Not yet, sweetie. The doctors say it might take some time." Oliver's lower lip trembled. "But he will wake up, right?" "Your Dad is very strong," Naomi said carefully. "He's fighting hard to come back to you." She led him to the couch, gathering her courage for what came next. "Oliver, I need to tell you something. Your grandmother has come to town." "Grandma Elaine?" Oliver looked surprised. "From Boston? Yes. She's very worried about your dad, and she thinks it would be best if you went to stay with her for a while." Oliver's eyes widened in alarm. "But I want to stay here. I want to visit Daddy at the hospital." "I know, sweetheart. You'll come with me to Grandma's, right?" Oliver asked, his voice small and frightened. Naomi swallowed hard. I wish I could, but your grandmother thinks it's best if I don't. Oliver's face crumpled. But you promised. You promised you wouldn't leave me. The accusation hit Naomi like a physical blow. I know I did. And I don't want to break that promise, Oliver. I love... She caught herself. It wasn't her place to say such things. But oh, how she had come to love this child in the few short months she'd been his nanny. Oliver threw himself into her arms, sobbing. Please don't let her take me away. Please, Miss Naomi. Naomi held him tight, her own tears falling into his soft hair. I'll talk to her again, Oliver. I'll try to make her understand. But she had no real hope of changing Elaine Sinclair's mind. The woman had made her position crystal clear. That night, after Oliver finally cried himself to sleep, Naomi sat at the kitchen table, her untouched tea growing cold. She felt helpless, caught in a situation where she had no real authority. She was just the nanny, not family, not someone with any legal right to determine what happened to Oliver. The doorbell rang, surprising her. At this hour, who could it be? James Wilson stood on the doorstep, his expression grave. Miss Carter, I apologize for the late hour. May I come in? Naomi led him to the living room. Is there news about Ethan? No change, James said, taking a seat. But there are other matters we need to discuss. He pulled some papers from his briefcase. Are you aware that Ethan updated his will last month? Naomi shook her head. Why would I be? Because he named you in it. James handed her a document. In the event of his incapacitation, Ethan designated you as Oliver's guardian. Naomi stared at the paper in shock. That's not possible. I'd only been working here a few weeks when he did this. James smiled slightly. Ethan's a good judge of character. Always has been. He saw something in you that he trusted. He told me Oliver had never been happier than since you arrived. But Mrs. Sinclair said, Elaine has no legal authority here, James interrupted. This document gives you the right to continue caring for Oliver in his home, and it gives you temporary power to make medical decisions for Ethan until he recovers. If he recovers, Naomi whispered, the fear she'd been suppressing finally finding voice. James leaned forward. You should know something about Ethan. He doesn't give up easily, neither should we. He slid another document across the table. This paper needs your signature. It officially makes you Oliver's temporary guardian and gives you access to the funds Ethan set aside for his care. Naomi's hand trembled as she picked up the pen. Elaine Sinclair won't accept this easily. No, James agreed. She won't. But Ethan's wishes are legally binding. Besides, he added with a faint smile, I've dealt with Elaine for years. I can handle her. After James left, Naomi sat alone, staring at the signed papers. What had seemed like the end of her time with Oliver had suddenly transformed into an enormous responsibility. Ethan had trusted her with his most precious treasure. His son, I won't let you down, she whispered into the quiet house. Either of you. Shay. Confrontation came the next morning. Elaine arrived with a driver and empty suitcases ready to collect Oliver. Victor trailed behind her, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Oliver's things are staying right where they are, Naomi said firmly, standing in the doorway. And so is Oliver. Elaine's perfectly lined lips thinned in anger. Step aside, Miss Carter. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Naomi held out the guardianship papers. Ethan legally appointed me as Oliver's guardian in case of emergency. He stays with me in his home. This is preposterous. Elaine snatched the papers, her eyes scanning them rapidly. Victor, call the lawyers. This can't possibly be valid. Victor examined the document, his expression changing. It looks legitimate, Mother. Ethan's signature, properly witnessed and notarized. I don't care if God himself witnessed it. She's known my son for what, 3 months? I'm his mother. Yes. You are, Naomi acknowledged. And you're welcome to visit Oliver any time. He could use his grandmother's love right now, but his home is here, with his friends and his school, with the life his father built for him. Elaine's face flushed with anger. How you think you've won, don't you? Some glorified babysitter worming your way into my son's good graces. What did you do, seduce him? "Mother!" Victor exclaimed, shocked. "Mrs. Sinclair," Naomi said quietly, "I understand you're upset and worried. About Ethan. We all are. But Oliver needs stability now more than ever. That's all I'm trying to provide." "This isn't over," Elaine warned, turning to leave. "Not by a long shot." After they left, Naomi sagged against the closed door. The confrontation had drained her, but she knew it was just the beginning. Elaine Sinclair wasn't a woman who gave up easily. Soft footsteps on the stairs made her look up. Oliver stood there in his pajamas, his stuffed dinosaur clutched tightly. To his chest, "Was that Grandma? Is she taking me away?" Naomi crossed to him, kneeling to his level. "No, sweetheart, you're staying right here with me. Your dad made arrangements to make sure of that." Oliver's relief was palpable. "Really? We can stay together?" "Really," Naomi promised, hugging him close. "Now, how about some breakfast? Then we should go see your dad." At the hospital, Naomi settled into what had become her routine. She brought children's books to read to Ethan, believing that somehow some part of him might hear. Oliver would tell his father about his day, about school, about the things they did at home. The doctors were guarded in their prognosis. "The brain is still a mystery to us in many ways," Dr. Reynolds explained. "Some coma patients wake up after a few days, some after months, and some—" He didn't need to finish the thought. Naomi understood the unspoken reality. Some never woke up. "At all, what can we do?" she asked. "Talk to him, touch his hand. Maintain that connection," the doctor advised. "And take care of yourself and Oliver. That's what Ethan would want." Days turned into weeks. Naomi established a new normal for Oliver: school, homework, playtime, and daily visits to the hospital. She kept his routine as consistent as possible, providing the stability he desperately needed. James helped navigate the complex business matters that couldn't wait, making decisions based on what he believed Ethan would want. Victor, surprisingly, became an ally, visiting often and spending time with Oliver. Elaine remained a problem. She filed a legal challenge to the guardianship, claiming Naomi had manipulated Ethan into signing the papers. The case moved slowly through the courts, hanging over Naomi's head like a sword. Through it all, Naomi never wavered in her commitment to both Sinclairs, the conscious one who needed her love and guidance, and the unconscious one who couldn't ask for her loyalty, but had it completely. 1 month after the accident, Naomi arrived at the hospital to find Dr. Reynolds waiting for her. "We've detected increased brain activity," he said cautiously. "It's a positive sign, but I don't want to raise false hopes. Many coma patients show similar signs without regaining consciousness." Naomi's heart raced nonetheless. "But it could mean he's improving." "It could. We'll monitor him closely." That night, after Oliver was asleep, Naomi returned to the hospital. She pulled her chair close to Ethan's bed and took his hand. As she always did. "Oliver is doing so well, Ethan. He's being so brave. Yesterday he got a gold star for his science project, all about the solar system, just like the one you helped him with. He said he did it for you, to make you proud." She gently adjusted his blanket. "Your mother is still fighting me for custody. The hearing is next week. I'm scared, Ethan. Not for me, but for Oliver. He's been through so much change already." Naomi sighed, her thumb absently stroking the back of Ethan's hand. "The company is holding steady. James and Victor are doing their best. But the board is getting restless. Henderson keeps pushing for that sale you were fighting against." She continued her one-sided conversation, updating him on all the things he would want to know. It had become her ritual, this nightly debriefing. "I miss you," she admitted finally, her voice softening. "I know that's silly. We barely knew each other before the accident. But I miss your smile, the way you looked at Oliver, even our disagreements about your work schedule." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I keep wondering what would have happened if you hadn't gone to work that day, if you'd stayed home with us. Would things have been different between us? Would we have become more than employer and employee?" She wiped away her tears. "Listen to me being so selfish when you're fighting to come back to us. I should go, it's getting late, and Oliver had a nightmare last night, so I want to be there if he wakes up." Naomi stood and leaned over, pressing a gentle kiss to Ethan's forehead. "Good night, Ethan. We'll be back tomorrow." As she turned to leave, she felt it, the slightest pressure on her fingers. So faint she thought she might have imagined it. Ethan's hand had twitched in hers. "Ethan," she whispered, her heart pounding. "Can you hear me?" There was no further response, but Naomi pressed the call button anyway, hope blooming in her chest for the first time in weeks. The custody hearing loomed like a storm, cloud on the horizon. Despite James's reassurances that the legal documents were solid, Naomi couldn't help but worry. Elaine Sinclair was wealthy, well-connected, and determined to take Oliver away. The night before the hearing, Naomi tucked Oliver into bed with an extra tight hug. "Are you scared about tomorrow?" he asked perceptively. "A little," she admitted, smoothing his hair. "But your dad trusted me to take care of you, and that's what I'm going to do." "Grandma says you only want Dad's money," Oliver said quietly. "But that's not true, is it?" Naomi's heart ached at his words. "No, sweetheart, that's not true at all. I care about you very much, and I believe your dad is going to wake up and come back to us." "Me too," Oliver said firmly. "And when he does, we can all live together, like a real family." Naomi kissed his forehead, not trusting herself to respond to his innocent wish. "Sweet dreams, Oliver." Downstairs, she found Victor waiting in the living room. "I thought you might need some moral support," he explained, "and maybe a strategy session for tomorrow." "I appreciate that," Naomi said, genuinely touched by his support. "Your mother seems pretty determined." Victor sighed. "She is, but I've been thinking a lot about why Ethan chose you as Oliver's guardian. He must have seen something special in you. I think I'm starting to see it too." He hesitated, then added, "Mother wasn't always like this. After our father died, she became harder, more controlling, especially with Ethan, since he was younger." "That must have been difficult for both of you," Naomi said gently. "It was, but Ethan never let it break him. He built his own path, his own life." Victor smiled sadly. He was always the stronger one, more willing to stand up to her. "And now I think it's my turn to stand up to her." Victor's expression was resolute. "I'm testifying on your behalf tomorrow, Naomi. Oliver belongs here, with you, in the home his father made for him." Tears sprang to Naomi's eyes. "Thank you, Victor. That means more than you know." After he left, Naomi sat alone in the quiet house, trying to prepare herself for tomorrow's battle. No matter what happened in that courtroom, she would fight for Oliver with everything she had, because somewhere along the way, the little boy with the sad eyes and dinosaur pajamas had become her heart. The courtroom was intimidating, all polished wood and solemn faces. Naomi sat beside her attorney, a kind-faced woman named Sandra, whom James had hired for her. Across the aisle, Elaine Sinclair sat rigidly in an expensive suit, flanked by not one, but 3 attorneys, as high. The hearing began. Elaine's lead lawyer painted Naomi as an opportunist who had manipulated a vulnerable single father. Ms. Carter had been employed by Mr. Sinclair for less than 3 months when he mysteriously changed his will to give her control over his child and access to funds. We contend this change was made under undue influence. Naomi's hands trembled in her lap, but she kept her expression calm. When it was her turn to testify, she spoke from her heart. "I came to work for Ethan Sinclair because I believe every child deserves to be seen and valued. Oliver was a wonderful boy who needed stability. His father was trying his best, but he needed help balancing his responsibilities. That's all I was there to provide, help and stability." "And access to his fortune?" Elaine's lawyer suggested, smoothly. "I have no interest in Ethan's money," Naomi said firmly. "The only funds I've touched are those needed for Oliver's care and the household expenses. Everything else remains untouched." "Yet you live in a mansion, drive Mr. Sinclair's cars. I live where Oliver lives," Naomi interrupted. "I drive the family car that takes him to school. Would you have me uproot him from his home, his school, his friends, all the stability he has left, during the most traumatic time in his young life?" When Victor testified, a murmur ran through the courtroom. No one had expected Ethan's brother to contradict their mother. "My brother knew exactly what he was doing when he appointed Naomi as Oliver's guardian," Victor stated clearly. Ethan was always thoughtful and deliberate in his decisions, especially those involving his son. In the short time Naomi had been working for him, Oliver transformed from a withdrawn, sad child into a happy, thriving boy. Anyone who knew them could see the difference. Elaine's face tightened with fury as her own son betrayed her. The judge, a stern-looking woman with grey hair, asked direct questions of everyone involved. When it was Oliver's turn, Naomi's heart ached as the small boy climbed into the witness stand, looking terrified. "Oliver," the judge said gently, "I just want to ask you a few questions to help me make my decision. Is that okay?" Oliver nodded solemnly. "Who takes care of you at home now that your dad is in the hospital?" "Ms. Naomi," Oliver answered immediately. "She makes sure I do my homework and eat vegetables and brush my teeth, and she takes me to see Daddy every day." "And do you like living with Ms. Naomi?" Oliver nodded emphatically. "She reads me stories like Daddy used to, and she never breaks her promises. She said she wouldn't leave me, and she didn't, even when Grandma tried to make her." The judge smiled slightly. "What about your grandmother? Do you like spending time with her too?" Oliver hesitated. "Grandma buys me lots of presents, but she says mean things about Ms. Naomi, and she doesn't want to talk about Daddy waking up. She says he probably won't." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Elaine's face flushed deeply. "But Miss Naomi says Daddy is strong and fighting to come back to us," Oliver continued, his voice strengthening. "She helps me talk to him when we visit. She says he can hear us, even if he can't answer yet." The judge's expression softened. "Thanks. You, Oliver, you've been very brave and very helpful." After Oliver returned to his seat, the judge called a brief recess to consider her decision. Naomi sat frozen, unable to even pray, her future and, more importantly, Oliver's, hanging in the balance. When the court reconvened, the judge's decision was clear and firm. The court finds that Ethan Sinclair's wishes, as expressed in his legal documents, should be respected. Naomi Carter will retain temporary guardianship of Oliver Sinclair, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Mrs. Sinclair will have visitation rights to be arranged through Ms. Carter. Relief flooded through Naomi so intensely she nearly collapsed. Oliver, not fully understanding the legal proceedings but grasping the outcome, threw his arms around her with a whoop of joy. Elaine Sinclair stormed out of the courtroom without a word, leaving her lawyers scrambling behind her. Victor approached, them smiling. "Congratulations. It was the right decision." "Thank you for your help," Naomi said sincerely. "I just told the truth," Victor replied. "Ethan would be proud of how you're fighting for Oliver." He hesitated. "And I think he'd be proud of me too for finally standing up to Mother." As they left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. The custody battle between the wealthy Sinclair family and the commoner nanny had become tabloid fodder, much to Naomi's dismay. She hurried Oliver to the car, shielding him from the intrusive lenses. "Let's go see your dad," she suggested, wanting to escape the circus atmosphere. "I bet he'd like to hear about our big day." At the hospital, Naomi and Oliver found Dr. Reynolds waiting with an unusually bright expression. "There are some encouraging developments," he said. "The EEG is showing increased activity, and the nurses have reported more frequent hand movements." Hope surged through Naomi. "What does that mean?" "It could mean we're seeing the first signs of emergence from the coma," the doctor explained cautiously. "It's still early, and the process can be very slow, but these are positive indicators." Oliver's face lit up. "Daddy's waking up," Dr. Reynolds knelt to the boy's level. "Your dad's brain is showing signs that it's healing, Oliver. That's very good news, but he still has a long way to go." In Ethan's room, Oliver immediately began telling his unconscious father about the courthouse and the judge, chattering away with more animation than he'd shown in weeks. Naomi stood back, watching with a full heart. This family had become her world, this brave little boy and his silent father. Whatever happened next, she was committed to them both. Later, when Oliver went to the cafeteria with a nurse for ice cream, Naomi sat beside Ethan's bed. "We won the hearing," she told him, taking his hand. "Oliver stays with me, in your home, just like you wanted." Victor was amazing. He stood up to your mother and testified on our behalf. She gently smoothed Ethan's hair, longer now after weeks in the hospital. The doctors say your brain activity is increasing. They think it's a good sign. I've always known you were in there fighting to come back to us. Naomi leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. We need you, Ethan. Oliver misses you so much, and She swallowed hard. I miss the man I was just getting to know, the father who loves his son more than anything, the businessman who was learning to balance work and family, the man whose smile could light up a room. She pressed her lips to his hand. Please come back to us. As if in response, Ethan's fingers twitched against hers, and then, so subtle she might have missed it if she hadn't been watching intently, his eyelids fluttered. Naomi's heart nearly stopped. Ethan, can you hear me? Another flutter, a slight movement of his lips. She pressed the call button urgently. Dr. Reynolds, something's happening. The medical team rushed in, checking vital signs and responding to what they were seeing on the monitors. Dr. Reynolds shined a light in Ethan's eyes, then smiled broadly. He's responding to stimuli. This is very encouraging. He turned to Naomi. Talk to him. Let him hear your voice. Naomi leaned close to Ethan's ear, her voice trembling with emotion. Ethan, it's Naomi. Oliver and I are here. We're waiting for you. If you can hear me, please keep fighting. Come back to your son. He needs you so much. And then, the miracle. They'd been waiting for... Ethan's eyes opened, just for a moment, unfocused and confused before closing again. But it was enough to send joy coursing through Naomi's body. He opened his eyes, she cried. He looked at me. Dr. Reynolds nodded, his own excitement evident despite his professional demeanor. This is an excellent sign. He may drift in and out for a while. That's normal with coma emergence. But Ms. Carter, I believe Ethan Sinclair is finally coming. Back to us. Naomi couldn't hold back her tears. Should I get Oliver? Let's give Mr. Sinclair a little time, the doctor advised. These first moments can be disorienting. But yes, his son's voice would be good medicine right now. When Oliver returned from the cafeteria, Naomi knelt to share the news. Your dad opened his eyes, sweetheart. Just for a moment, but the doctors think he's starting to wake up. Oliver's ice cream cone dropped forgotten, to the floor. Really? Daddy's awake? He's starting to wake up, Naomi clarified. It might take some time and he might be confused at first, but yes, he's coming back to us. Oliver ran into his father's room, stopping short at the sight of all the medical personnel. Dr. Reynolds smiled kindly at him. Your dad is showing signs of waking up, Oliver. Would you like to talk to him? He might be able to hear you better than anyone else. Oliver approached the bed cautiously. Daddy? It's me, Oliver. Can you wake up? I've been taking good care of... Miss Naomi, just like you would want. We're waiting for you to come home. As if triggered by his son's voice, Ethan's eyes fluttered open again. This time they stayed open a few seconds longer, seemingly trying to focus on the source of the small voice. A barely audible sound escaped his lips, nothing comprehensible, but unmistakably an attempt to respond. Oliver's face lit up with joy. He's trying to talk to me. Daddy, it's okay, take your time, we're not going anywhere. Naomi's heart swelled with love for this remarkable child, so brave in the face of trauma that would crush many adults. She placed a supportive hand on his shoulder as he continued talking to his father, encouraging Ethan back to the world of the conscious. For the first time in months, Naomi allowed herself to truly believe that everything might turn out all right. After all, what she couldn't know was that the real challenges were only just beginning. Because even as Ethan Sinclair fought his way back to consciousness, the world he was returning to had changed in ways he couldn't possibly imagine, and the woman who had become the center of that world, his son's champion and protector, was no longer just his employee, but something far more complicated. The morning sun streamed through the hospital blinds, casting golden stripes across Ethan's bed. It had been 3 days since he'd first opened his eyes, and each day brought small but significant improvements. The doctors called it a gradual emergence from the coma, a process that required patience and realistic expectations. Naomi sat beside him, reading the morning newspaper aloud. It had become part of their routine, her way of helping reorient him to the world. Oliver sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, working on homework his teacher had sent. The stock market climbed again yesterday, Naomi read, with tech companies leading the gains. Sinclair Innovations shares rose 3% following announcement of a new patent. She paused as Ethan's eyes, now open for longer periods but still often unfocused, seemed to track toward her voice. "Ethan, can you hear me?" His lips moved, forming what looked like an attempt at speech. Only a hoarse sound emerged, but it was deliberate, a conscious effort to communicate. Oliver looked up eagerly. "Is Daddy trying to talk?" "I think so, sweetheart." Naomi pressed the call button. "Let's get Dr. Reynolds." The doctor arrived promptly, checking Ethan's vital signs and response to stimuli. "Excellent progress," he confirmed. "Mr. Sinclair, if you can understand me, blink once." After a moment's delay, Ethan blinked deliberately. Oliver gasped in delight. "He did it, he understands." "Very good," Dr. Reynolds said, smiling. "Mr. Sinclair, you're in St. Luke's Hospital. You were in an accident and have been unconscious for some time. Your son and Miss Carter have been here with you every day." Ethan's eyes moved slowly from the doctor to Oliver, then to Naomi. There was confusion there, but also unmistakable recognition. "The speech therapist will be in later today," Dr. Reynolds explained to Naomi. "Recovery of verbal communication can take time, but this response is very encouraging." After the doctor left, Oliver moved closer to his father's side. "Daddy, I knew you'd wake up. Ms. Naomi said you were fighting to come back to us, and you did." Ethan's hand twitched on the blanket, fingers stretching toward his son. Oliver carefully took his father's hand, mindful of the IV line. "It's okay, Daddy, you don't have to talk yet. I can talk enough for both of us." Naomi watched the interaction with tears in her eyes. For months, she'd been telling Oliver his father would come back to them. Now, against the odds, it was finally happening. The following weeks brought steady improvement. Ethan progressed from blinking responses to whispered words, from sitting up, briefly to longer periods of consciousness. The brain injury had left him weak on his right side, requiring intensive physical therapy, but his cognitive functions were slowly returning. Sometimes, though, confusion clouded his features. He would look at Naomi with puzzlement, as if trying to piece together his memories of her. "It's normal," Dr. Reynolds assured her. "Memory gaps are common with traumatic brain injuries. Some memories may return, some may not." Naomi tried not to take it personally, when Ethan sometimes stared at her like she was a stranger. After all, they'd only known each other for a short time before the accident. The deeper relationship she felt had developed largely in her own heart, through one-sided conversations with an unconscious man. Oliver, however, bridged the gap beautifully. His natural chatter filled in the blanks, constantly referencing Ms. Naomi and me as a unit in all their daily activities. "Ms. Naomi helped me build the best science project, Daddy. We got first place. And she takes me to soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday. She never misses a game, just like you used to before you got hurt." During these monologues, Ethan would often look from Oliver to Naomi with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, gratitude mixed with something else, something more complex. One afternoon, when Oliver had gone to the cafeteria with a nurse, Ethan managed his longest sentence yet. "How long?" he asked, his voice a raspy whisper. Naomi leaned closer. "The accident. It was 5 months ago, Ethan." His eyes widened in shock. "Oh, you've been making wonderful progress," she assured him quickly. "The doctors are very encouraged." Ethan's gaze was intense, focused. "Oliver? He's doing well. We've kept his routine as normal as possible. School, activities, friends. He's been so brave, Ethan, so strong. You stayed." The words seemed to cost him considerable effort. Naomi nodded, unsure how much he remembered. "Yes, I've been taking care of Oliver just like you wanted." His hand moved across the blanket toward hers. She hesitantly placed her palm against his, and his fingers weakly curled around hers. "Thank you," he whispered. The simple words, filled with such genuine emotion, brought tears to her eyes. "You don't need to thank me. I care about Oliver very much. Ethan held her gaze, and for a moment, Naomi felt he was trying to convey something more, something his recovering brain couldn't yet put into words. The moment was broken by Oliver's return, enthusiastically describing the chocolate pudding he'd negotiated from the kitchen staff. As Ethan's recovery progressed, the hospital became a hub of activity. Victor visited regularly, bringing updates from the company. James came with business matters that required attention, carefully explaining each document before Ethan attempted a shaky signature. Even Elaine made occasional appearances, though her interactions with Naomi remained coldly civil at best. She had not forgiven her son's nanny for the humiliation of the custody hearing, nor her own son for testifying against her. Mother, Victor had explained privately to Naomi, has always believed in the primacy of blood ties. The idea that Ethan would trust an outsider with Oliver cuts deep. Naomi tried to be understanding, to make space for the grandmother's relationship with Oliver. But Elaine made it difficult, often making comments within Ethan's hearing about temporary arrangements and when things get back to normal. It was unclear how much Ethan comprehended of these undercurrents. His speech was improving daily, but he still tired easily and sometimes struggled to follow complex conversations. The doctors assured them this too was normal and would likely improve with time. What was clear, however, was Ethan's growing awareness of Naomi's role in their lives. He watched her interactions with Oliver carefully, his eyes tracking their easy rapport, the small routines they had developed, the inside jokes they shared. Sometimes, when Naomi arrived at the hospital after taking Oliver to school, she would find Ethan waiting with an alertness that hadn't been there before, as if her presence was something he'd been anticipating. 6 weeks after Ethan first opened his eyes, Dr. Reynolds delivered the news they'd been hoping for. "I believe Mr. Sinclair is ready for discharge," he announced. "He'll need continued therapy and home care, but he's stable enough to continue his recovery at home." Oliver whooped with joy. "Daddy's coming home." Naomi felt a strange mixture of happiness and anxiety. Having Ethan home would be wonderful for Oliver, but it also complicated her position. She was still legally Oliver's guardian, still running the household. But with Ethan conscious and improving, where did that leave her? She voiced these concerns to James when he came to help with the discharge paperwork. "Ethan still needs considerable care," James pointed out. "He's not yet able to manage stairs independently or handle Oliver's care alone. You're still needed, Naomi." "But it's different now," she insisted. "When he was unconscious, my role was clear. Now," James gave her a knowing look, "now you're worried about boundaries? About where you fit?" Naomi nodded, embarrassed by her transparency. "Talk to him," James advised simply. "Ethan's recovery is remarkable, but he's still the same man, direct, honest, appreciative of the same qualities in others." Later that day, as they prepared for Ethan's homecoming, Naomi tried to create a sense of normalcy amidst her own swirling emotions. She supervised the delivery and setup of hospital equipment in the downstairs guest suite, which had been converted. For Ethan's use, since he couldn't yet manage the stairs to his bedroom, Oliver helped decorate, hanging welcome home signs and arranging his father's favorite things around the room. "Do you think Daddy remembers our house?" he asked suddenly, the question revealing his own anxieties. Naomi hugged him close. "I think some things are too important to forget, sweetheart, like how much he loves you." "And you," Oliver added confidently. "Daddy loves you too, I can tell." Naomi's heart stuttered. "Oliver, your dad and I, we're not." "I know," Oliver said, with the simple wisdom of children. "But you love each other now. I can see it in the way you look at each other." Naomi didn't know how to respond to such innocent certainty. Thankfully, the doorbell saved her from having to try. Victor stood on the doorstep with an enormous fruit basket. "Pre-homecoming delivery," he explained. "Mother sent it. Consider it an olive branch." Naomi accepted it with surprise. "That's unexpected." Victor shrugged. "Ethan's recovery has softened her somewhat, and I may have had a few frank conversations with her about her behavior." "Thank you," Naomi said sincerely. It would mean a lot to Oliver to have his grandmother more involved in a positive way. "Speaking of involvement," Victor said, following her into the kitchen, "I wanted to ask about your plans." Naomi tensed. My plans. Now that Ethan's coming. Home? Have you two discussed arrangements going forward? Not yet, Naomi admitted. It's been focused on his recovery, getting him strong enough to come home. Victor studied her thoughtfully. You know, my brother was changing even before the accident. When you came into their lives, something shifted. I've never seen him or Oliver happier than they were in those weeks. Naomi busied herself arranging the fruit, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. He cares for you, Victor continued gently. I can see it, even through his struggle to communicate. Whatever you decide, please remember that. Before Naomi could respond, Oliver raced into the kitchen. Miss Naomi, the hospital called. Daddy's discharge papers are all ready. We can pick him up at 2 o'clock. The moment for private conversation was gone, replaced by the excited flurry of final preparations. Bringing Ethan home was both joyous and overwhelming. A nurse helped settle him into the newly arranged bedroom, reviewing medication, schedules and therapy exercises with Naomi. Oliver hovered anxiously until the medical personnel left, then perched carefully on the edge of his father's bed. Do you like your room, Daddy? Ms. Naomi and I set it up special for you. Ethan looked around at the transformed space. Familiar photos on the walls, his favorite books within reach, a large window with a view of the garden that Naomi and Oliver had revitalized during his absence. It's perfect, he said, his speech still slightly slurred but improving daily. Thank you both. His eyes met Naomi's over Oliver's head, filled with gratitude that went beyond the room preparations. Homework. Time, Oliver, Naomi reminded gently. Your dad needs to rest. You can show him your science fair trophy after dinner. Once Oliver had reluctantly departed, an awkward silence fell between them. Naomi busied herself adjusting pillows and checking that the water pitcher was full. Naomi? Ethan's voice stopped her nervous movements. Please sit. Talk to me. She perched uncertainly in the chair beside his bed. How are you feeling? Any pain? I'm fine. He studied her face. You look tired. The simple observation, filled with genuine concern, nearly undid her. For months she had been the caretaker, the strong one. No one had thought to ask how she was managing. It's been a long road, she admitted. But seeing you home, improving every day, it's worth every moment. Ethan's hand moved slowly across the blanket toward hers, just as it had in the hospital. This time, his grip was stronger when she placed her palm against his. James told me everything, he said. The guardianship, my mother's lawsuit, how you fought for Oliver. Naomi swallowed hard. I made you a promise. I couldn't let him be uprooted when he was already suffering so much. You did more than keep a promise, Ethan said, his eyes intent on hers. You became his rock when his world was collapsing. He paused, gathering strength for his next words. I remember, Naomi, not everything, but enough. I remember how happy he was when you came into our lives, how you changed things, made this house a home again. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes. Oliver is an amazing child. It was easy to love him. And me? Ethan asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The doctors say you came every day, that you talked to me for hours, that you never gave up believing I would wake up. Naomi blushed, unable to meet his gaze. How could she explain the connection she'd felt growing during those one-sided conversations? How her feelings had deepened as she'd shared her days, her thoughts, her heart with a man who couldn't respond. I should check on Oliver, she said. Starting to rise, Ethan's grip on her hand tightened, keeping her in place. Please, I need to understand. Naomi took a deep breath. At first, I came because of Oliver. He needed to believe you would recover, and I wanted to support that hope. But then it became more. I felt like I was getting to know you through him, through your home, through the life you'd built. She hesitated, then added softly, and maybe I needed someone to talk to as well. Someone who wouldn't judge or have expectations. You were a good listener. A smile touched Ethan's lips. First time anyone's accused me of that. The small joke broke the tension, and Naomi smiled back. Well, you've improved with practice. His expression grew serious again. I don't remember everything from before, but I'm starting to remember feelings. I was beginning to care for you, wasn't I? Before the accident? Naomi's heart raced. We were just getting to know each other, Ethan. You were my employer. But there was something changing, he persisted. I remember wanting to come home, looking forward to seeing you and Oliver together, feeling like we could be... He trailed off, frustration crossing his features as the words eluded him. Don't push yourself, Naomi said gently. There's time to figure everything out. Ethan nodded, reluctantly. Will you stay? Not just as Oliver's guardian, but here, with us. The question held layers of meaning that neither of them was ready to fully explore. But the hope in his eyes was unmistakable. I'll stay as long as you and Oliver need me, Naomi promised. It wasn't quite a declaration, but it was a beginning, a bridge between what had been and what might be. The following weeks established a new rhythm for the household. Ethan's days were filled with therapy sessions, physical, occupational, speech, interspersed with rest periods and gradually increasing time with Oliver. Naomi coordinated it all, balancing Oliver's needs with Ethan's recovery schedule. She continued managing the household, now with the added complexity of Ethan's medical care and the steady stream of visitors. James came regularly with company updates, often staying to share meals with the family. Victor visited weekly, sometimes, bringing Elaine, whose attitude toward Naomi had warmed from frigid to merely cool. Through it all, something was shifting between Ethan and Naomi, subtle changes in the way he watched her move around the room, the way she automatically knew when he needed rest before he admitted it himself, the comfortable silences that fell between them in the evenings after Oliver was in bed. 1 month after Ethan's return home, Dr. Reynolds came for a follow-up evaluation. Remarkable progress, he declared after putting Ethan through a series of tests. Your speech is nearly back to normal, and your right side is regaining strength faster than expected. When can I start working again? Ethan asked. It was a question he'd been raising more frequently as his recovery progressed. Light duties only, the doctor cautioned. A few hours a day at most. Your brain still needs time to heal completely. After the doctor left, Naomi found Ethan in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at the garden. That was good news, she said, joining him. You've worked so hard in therapy. Ethan nodded, but his expression remained troubled. I need to get back, Naomi. The company needs me. Oliver needs to see me strong again, and you... What about me? She asked when he didn't continue. You deserve your life back, he said quietly. You've put everything on hold for us for so long. Naomi knelt beside his wheelchair to meet his eyes. Ethan, this is my life now. I'm exactly where I want to be. He searched her face. As Oliver's guardian? As my nurse? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. As whatever you and Oliver need me to be, she answered carefully. Ethan's hand came up to touch her cheek, his fingers steadier than they had been even a week ago. What if I need you to be more than that? What if I'm falling in love with the woman who saved my son and believed in me when everyone else was losing hope? Naomi's breath caught. Ethan, you don't have to... I know I don't, he interrupted gently. I know the timing is complicated. My recovery, our situation, Oliver's attachment to you. But I need you to know what I'm feeling, even if we need to move slowly. Tears filled Naomi's eyes. I started falling for you before the accident, she admitted. Just glimpses of the man you were when you let down your guard. And then during those months when I sat beside your bed, sharing my days with you, watching Oliver's love for you, my feelings grew into something I couldn't ignore. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. So we take it one day at a time. See where this leads? Naomi nodded, her heart too full for words. From the doorway came a small sound. Oliver, watching them with a triumphant smile. I knew it, he declared. I told you, Ms. Naomi, I told you Daddy loves you too. Naomi blushed furiously, but Ethan just laughed and held out his good arm. Come here, buddy, you're right, I do love Ms. Naomi. Is that okay with you? Oliver launched himself at them both, creating a three-way hug that had Naomi's eyes overflowing, with happy tears. It's more than okay, Oliver said firmly. It's perfect, now we can be a real family. Over his son's head, Ethan's eyes met Naomi's, filled with promise and possibility. The tentative romance bloomed slowly, respectful of Ethan's recovery and Oliver's adjustment. Small moments built a foundation. Ethan's hand-finding, Naomi's during family movie nights, shared smiles across the dinner table, quiet conversations after Oliver was asleep. 2 months after Ethan's return home, he took his first unaided steps in physical therapy. By the following week, he was moving around the ground floor with just a cane for support. "I want to surprise Oliver," he told Naomi one afternoon while his son was at school. "Help me practice walking up to his classroom at pickup time." Naomi's heart swelled at his determination. "Are you sure you're ready? It's a long walk from the parking lot." "I'm ready," Ethan said with the quiet confidence that had returned as his body healed. "I want him to see me standing on my own. No wheelchair. No walker." They practiced around the garden, Naomi staying close but letting Ethan push his limits safely. His right leg was still weaker than his left, his gait slightly uneven, but his progress was undeniable. That afternoon, when they arrived at Oliver's school, Ethan insisted on waiting outside the car. "Stay back a little," he told Naomi. "Let him see me first." She watched from a few steps behind as Oliver emerged from the building, scanning the pickup area as usual. The moment he spotted his father standing with just a cane for support, his face transformed with pure joy. "Daddy!" he shouted, running full speed toward Ethan. At the last moment, he remembered to be gentle, slowing to throw his arms carefully around his father's waist. "You're walking by yourself," Oliver marveled, looking up at Ethan with adoration. "I wanted to surprise you," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been practicing with Naomi." Oliver turned to include her in his excitement. "Did you see, Miss Naomi? Daddy's walking." "I see," she said, her own eyes shining with tears. "He's worked very hard." Other parents and teachers were watching the scene, many with misty eyes. The story of the billionaire in a coma and his devoted nanny had made headlines for months. Seeing Ethan Sinclair standing tall again, embracing his son, was a moment of public triumph. One brave little girl approached them. "Are you Oliver's dad? The one who was asleep for a long time?" Ethan nodded, smiling. "I was, but I'm awake now." "My grandma was in a coma too," the girl shared solemnly. "But she didn't wake up. I'm glad you did." Oliver put his arm protectively around his father's waist. "My dad is really strong." And Miss Naomi talked to him every day so he wouldn't forget us. The girl looked at Naomi with newfound respect. "Are you Oliver's mom now?" The innocent question brought a blush to Naomi's cheeks. Before she could formulate a response, Ethan answered, "Not yet," he said, his eyes meeting Naomi's with unmistakable meaning. "But we're working on it." The drive home was filled with Oliver's excited chatter, but Naomi's mind kept returning to Ethan's words. "Not yet." The implication sent her heart racing. Later that evening, after Oliver was asleep, Ethan found Naomi in the garden, sitting on the bench they'd placed near the sunflowers she and Oliver had planted. "May I join you?" he asked, his cane crunching lightly on the gravel path. Naomi moved over to make room, watching with pride as he navigated the short distance and lowered himself to sit beside her. "You did wonderfully today," she said. Oliver was so proud. So was I. "Thank you for helping me surprise him." Ethan's hand found hers in the gathering dusk. "And for everything else. Everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the evening sounds of the garden. "About what I said at the school," Ethan began hesitantly. "To that little girl. I hope I didn't overstep." Naomi turned to face him. "Did you mean it?" His expression was solemn. "Yes, I know it's fast. I know my recovery isn't complete. But these past months have taught me not to waste time when you know what you want." He took both her hands in his. "I was falling for you before the accident, Naomi, and somehow, even in the darkness of the coma, I think I held on to that feeling. When I opened my eyes and saw you there, it felt right, like coming home." Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. "I was so afraid you wouldn't remember, that we'd have to start over, or that you wouldn't feel the same." "I remember enough," Ethan assured her. "And what I don't remember, I've relearned every day since waking up. Your kindness, your strength. the way you love my son, the way you believed in me when the odds were against us." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "Ethan," Naomi gasped, recognizing what it was. "Are you sure?" "More sure than I've ever been of anything." He said simply, "I know this isn't the most romantic proposal. I can't kneel properly yet, and maybe it's too soon, but I don't want to wait any longer to tell you how I feel, to ask you to be part of our family officially." He opened the box, revealing a beautiful sapphire ring surrounded by small diamonds. "The stones reminded me of your eyes," he explained. "The first time Oliver and I saw you smile." Naomi's hand trembled as he slid the ring onto her finger. "What will people say? Your mother, the company, the press? They'll say I'm the luckiest man alive," Ethan replied firmly. "They'll say I found a woman who loved my son and believed in me when it mattered most. Or they'll say whatever they want. I don't care. All I care about is you, Oliver, and the life we can build together." Naomi looked down at the ring sparkling in the last light of day, then back up at the man who had fought his way back from darkness to offer her his heart. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Ethan." His smile was radiant as he pulled her close for a tender kiss that held the promise of 1,000 tomorrows. From the upstairs window, unseen by the couple in the garden, Oliver Sinclair watched the scene unfold with a satisfaction far beyond his years. He'd known all along they were meant to be a family, and sometimes he thought with the simple wisdom of childhood, grown-ups just needed a little help figuring out what was right in front of them all along. News of the engagement spread quickly through their circle. Victor was the first to congratulate them, genuinely delighted by the development. "I've been hoping for this," he admitted, hugging Naomi warmly. "You've been family in all the ways that matter for months now. It's about time you made it official." James was equally supportive, though he warned them to prepare for media attention. The billionaire marrying his son's nanny after waking from a coma? The tabloids will have a field day. Elaine's reaction was more complicated. When Ethan called to tell her, her initial silence spoke volumes. "Mother," he prompted after the pause had stretched uncomfortably long. "I suppose I should have seen this coming," she said finally. "The girl has certainly positioned herself well." Naomi didn't position herself for anything, Ethan replied firmly. "She stayed out of love for Oliver and supported me when many others had given up hope. She's the reason I've recovered as well as I have." "And you're sure this isn't gratitude being mistaken for love?" Elaine pressed. "I'm sure," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "And I hope you'll make an effort to welcome her into the family. For Oliver's sake, if not for mine." After another pause, Elaine sighed. "I suppose I should meet with my future daughter-in-law properly. Perhaps lunch next week." It wasn't enthusiastic acceptance, but it was a start. The media, as James had predicted, devoured the story. Headlines ranged from romantic, "Billionaire wakes from coma to find love," to cynical, "Nanny hits the jackpot." Photographers camped outside the gates, hoping for a glimpse of the couple. Through it all, Ethan, Naomi, and Oliver maintained their focus on what mattered, their growing bond as a family, and Ethan's continued recovery. One evening, as they sat in the living room after dinner, Ethan watching Naomi help Oliver with a school project, a sense of profound contentment washed over him. "I've been thinking," he said, drawing their attention, "about how close I came to missing all of this." Naomi's expression softened with understanding. "But you didn't miss it. You're here. We're together." "Because of you," Ethan said, reaching for her hand. "Because you believed I would come back when others were losing hope." Oliver looked up from his project. "Ms. Naomi told me every day that you were fighting to come back to us, Daddy. She said you were too strong to give up." "And she was right," Ethan said, pulling his son close with his stronger arm. "I had too much to live for." He met Naomi's eyes over Oliver's head, his gaze filled with a love that had grown through darkness into something unbreakable. As night fell outside, the three of them remained together in the warm circle of lamplight, a family forged not by blood or legal documents, but by something far more powerful, unwavering faith and the kind of love that never gives up, even in the darkest of times. And, in that quiet moment, Naomi knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings came from what seemed like tragic endings. Sometimes life's detours led to exactly where you were meant to be all along. Her heart full to bursting, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to the Sinclairs' door that day, changing not just their lives but her own, in ways she could never have imagined. The air was crisp with early autumn as Naomi stood in front of the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. The elegant ivory dress was simple but stunning, hugging her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor. Her hair was swept up with a few loose tendrils framing her face, and a delicate veil awaited placement on her head. "You look beautiful," said a voice from the doorway. Naomi turned to see Elaine Sinclair standing there, elegant as always in a pale blue suit that complemented her silver hair. Their relationship had evolved over the past months from cold hostility to a tentative respect, though true warmth remained elusive. "Thank you," Naomi replied, smoothing the front of her dress nervously. "Is everything ready outside?" "The garden looks magical," Elaine confirmed. "Victor has checked on Ethan and he's as nervous as you are." Naomi smiled at the thought. "I can't believe this day is finally here." Elaine approached, her expression unexpectedly serious. "Naomi, I owe you an apology. When Ethan first told me he was marrying you, I assumed the worst. I thought you were taking advantage of his vulnerability." "I know," Naomi said quietly. "You were trying to protect your son and grandson." "Yes, but I was wrong about you," Elaine admitted. "These past months, watching how you've supported Ethan's recovery, how you've loved Oliver, I've come to realize how fortunate my son is to have found you." Tears threatened to ruin Naomi's carefully applied makeup. "That means a lot to me. Elaine, I know how important family is to you. And now you are family," Elaine said, reaching into her purse, "which is why I wanted to give you this." She pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a pair of sapphire earrings that perfectly matched Naomi's engagement ring. "They were my grandmother's," Elaine explained. "They've been worn by Sinclair brides for generations. I wore them when I married Ethan's father." Naomi stared at the beautiful jewels, speechless with emotion. "Every bride needs something borrowed and something blue," Elaine said with a small smile. "These can be both." "I don't know what to say," Naomi whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Say, you'll wear them," Elaine replied simply. "Say you'll accept your place in our family, however complicated our beginning might have been." Naomi nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. As Elaine helped her put on the earrings, a knock came at the door. "Ms. Naomi?" "Grandma," Oliver's voice called. "They sent me to get you. Daddy says he can't wait any longer." Both women laughed, the emotional moment broken by the child's eager voice. Elaine opened the door to reveal Oliver looking handsome and grown up in his little tuxedo, proudly holding the pillow with the wedding rings. "Wow," he breathed, eyes wide. "You look like a princess, Miss Naomi." "Thank you, sweetheart," Naomi said, her heart melting at his expression. "Are you ready for your big job?" Oliver nodded solemnly. "I've been practicing. I won't drop the rings, I promise." "I know you won't," Naomi assured him. She looked at Elaine. "Shall we?" Elaine nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright. "My son is waiting." The garden had been transformed into an enchanted setting for the intimate ceremony. White roses and blue hydrangeas lined the aisle between the rows of chairs, where 50 close friends and family members sat. At the end of the aisle, beneath an arch of flowers, stood Ethan. Naomi's breath caught at the sight of him. Though he still walked with a slight limp, a reminder of the injury that had nearly taken him from them, he stood tall and straight in his tailored tuxedo. His face, once pale and drawn with illness, now glowed with health and happiness as he watched her approach. Victor stood beside him as best man, grinning broadly. James and several other friends from the company filled the groomsmen positions. The music began, not the traditional wedding march, but a sweet melody that Oliver had helped choose because, as he put it, "It sounds like falling in love." Oliver went first, taking his role as ring-bearer with utmost seriousness. The guest smiled as he carefully maneuvered down the aisle, concentrating on keeping the rings perfectly balanced on the pillow. Then it was Naomi's turn. With no father to give her away, she had planned to walk alone. But at the last minute, a surprising offer had changed that. "May I?" Victor asked, extending his arm to her at the beginning of the aisle. Naomi took his arm gratefully, touched by the gesture. As they began to walk, she saw Ethan's eyes fill with tears of joy, his gaze never leaving hers. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time for vows, Ethan took both of Naomi's hands in his voice strong and clear. "Naomi, when I woke from the darkness, you were there, holding my hand as you had been for months. You believed in me when others lost hope. You protected my son when he was most vulnerable. You rebuilt our family piece by piece." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the love you've shown us, to be the husband and father that you and Oliver deserve, to never take for granted the second chance we've been given." Tears streamed freely down Naomi's face as she began her own vows. "Ethan, loving you and Oliver has been the greatest gift of my life. What began as a job became a calling, and then a love deeper than I ever imagined possible. I promise to stand by you through whatever life brings, to continue believing in you even when times are hard, and to cherish each day we have together as the precious miracle it is." Oliver, unable to contain himself any longer, piped up from beside them. "And I promise to be the best son ever to both of you." Laughter rippled through the gathering, breaking the emotional tension. Ethan ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "That's a promise I know you'll keep, buddy." When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan pulled Naomi into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Oliver cheered louder than anyone, jumping up and down in excitement. "We're a real family now," he announced to the laughing guests as Ethan and Naomi turned to face them, hands joined. The reception was held on the mansion's terrace, transformed with twinkling lights and flowers. Dinner was served, champagne flowed, and speeches touched hearts. Victor raised his glass for the traditional best man's toast, "To my brother, who fought his way back from the edge to find the happiness he deserves. And to Naomi, who has taught our family the true meaning of loyalty and love. I've never seen two people more meant for each other." James added his own toast. "When Ethan first hired Naomi, he told me he just wanted someone reliable to help with Oliver. Little did he know he was bringing home the missing piece of his heart. To finding love in unexpected places." The most touching moment came when Oliver insisted on making his own speech. Standing on a chair so everyone could see him, he addressed the gathering with childish earnestness. "Before Miss Naomi came, Daddy worked all the time, and I was sad. A lot. Then she made everything better. She made us laugh again. When Daddy got hurt, she promised me she wouldn't leave us, and she didn't, even when Grandma was mean to her." Elaine flushed slightly but didn't interrupt. "Ms. Naomi told me every day that Daddy would come back to us, and she was right. And now we get to be together forever. So thank you, Ms. Naomi, for saving us." There wasn't a dry eye on the terrace as Naomi hugged the little boy who had become her son in every way that mattered. As the evening progressed, the traditional dances began. Ethan and Naomi swayed together to their first dance as husband and wife, his recovery so complete that only those who knew him well would notice the slight stiffness in his right side. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning against his chest. After their dance, Ethan surprised everyone by calling Oliver to the floor. "I believe we need a family dance," he announced, pulling his son into their embrace. The three of them moved together in a circle, Oliver between them, their hands joined around his shoulders. The guests watched, deeply touched by the sight of a family that had overcome so much to find their way to this moment. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Ethan led Naomi to a quiet corner of the garden for a moment alone. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small package from his pocket. Naomi unwrapped it to find a beautiful journal bound in soft leather. "Open it," Ethan encouraged. Inside, she found his handwriting filling the first page. "To my wife, on our wedding day. This is for all the conversations we'll have, all the memories we'll make, all the dreams we'll build together. I may have lost some memories from before, but I promise to cherish every moment from this day forward. All my love, always, Ethan." Naomi looked up, her heart so full she could barely speak. "It's perfect." "There's one more thing," Ethan said, his expression growing serious. "I spoke with Dr. Reynolds last week. He's cleared me to return to work full-time." "That's wonderful news," Naomi said, genuinely delighted by this milestone in his recovery. "But I've been thinking," Ethan continued, "about what's really important, about the lessons we've learned through all of this." He took her hands in his. "I've decided to restructure things at the company. James will take over as CEO, with me moving to chairman of the board. It will mean fewer hours, more flexibility." "Are you sure?" Naomi asked, knowing how much the company meant to him. "You've worked so hard." "To build it," Ethan smiled, "I'm sure. Nearly losing everything taught me what matters most. I want time with you and Oliver. I want to coach his soccer team and make it to his school events. I want lazy Sundays and family vacations and date nights with my beautiful wife." He brushed a strand of hair from her face tenderly. "Besides, there's something else I've been thinking about." "What's that?" Naomi asked, intrigued by his tone. "Oliver has been asking for a little brother or sister," Ethan said, watching her reaction carefully. "I thought perhaps we might start working on that sooner rather than later." Naomi's face lit up with joy. "Really? You want more children? With you?" "Absolutely," Ethan confirmed. "Our family still feels like it's just beginning. I want to experience it all with you. Pregnancy, midnight feedings, first steps, everything I missed with Oliver." Tears of happiness filled Naomi's eyes. "I want that too. So much." Their kiss sealed the promise of that shared dream, a new chapter in the journey they had begun together. 1 year later, on a bright spring morning, Naomi sat in a rocking chair in the nursery, cradling a newborn daughter with Ethan's blue eyes and a dusting of her own brown hair. Beside her, Oliver leaned in, gazing at his baby sister with wonder. "She's so tiny," he whispered. "Was I ever that small?" "Even smaller," Ethan said, entering the room with a tray of tea and cookies. He set it down and knelt beside the rocking chair, gently stroking his daughter's cheek. "You were in such a hurry to meet the world. You came 3 weeks early." "What was I like as a baby?" Oliver asked, a favorite question that always led to treasured stories. Ethan smiled, meeting Naomi's eyes over their children's heads. "You were perfect, just like your sister." The baby yawned and stretched, her tiny fist escaping the blanket. Oliver carefully offered his finger, which she grasped reflexively. "She's holding my hand," he exclaimed in delight. "I think she knows. I'm her big brother." "Of course she does," Naomi assured him, "and she knows how lucky she is to have you looking out for her." Ethan watched his family with a heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such happiness. 3 years ago, he had been a driven workaholic, a single father struggling to connect with his son. Then a car accident had nearly taken everything from him. Instead, it had given him everything that truly mattered. The doorbell rang, interrupting the peaceful family moment. "That'll be Mom and Victor," Ethan said, rising. "They've been calling every hour for updates." As he left to answer the door, Oliver looked up at Naomi. "I'm glad you became my mum," he said simply, "even if it took Daddy getting hurt for it to happen." Naomi kissed the top of his head. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, sweetheart. But look where we ended up. Exactly where we were meant to be." From downstairs came the sounds of Elaine's excited voice, Victor's deeper tones, and Ethan's warm welcome. Soon they would all be gathered around, admiring the newest Sinclair family member, continuing the story that had begun with a tragedy but had transformed into something beautiful. Naomi gazed down at her daughter, then at the boy who had claimed her heart from the beginning, and finally toward the doorway where her husband would soon reappear. The journey had been neither simple nor easy, but every step had led her home. Here, in this house once filled with sadness and loneliness, now overflowing with love and laughter. Here with these people who had become her world, here in the family that had been created not just by blood or marriage, but by the unbreakable bonds forged through sacrifice, commitment, and unwavering faith in one another. "Welcome to our family, little one," she whispered to her daughter. "You have no idea how loved you are, how far we've come to get here, or how much we have to be thankful for." The baby opened her eyes briefly, as if taking in her mother's words before falling back into peaceful slumber, secure, as she would always be, in the embrace of a family that had learned the hard way just how precious each moment together truly was. Outside, the garden bloomed with the sunflowers Naomi and Oliver had planted during those anxious months of waiting and hoping. They had survived winter's chill and returned stronger than before, much like the family that had tended them with such care. As spring sunshine streamed through the nursery windows, casting a golden glow over the scene, Ethan returned with his mother and brother. His eyes met Naomi's across the room, filled with the same wonder and gratitude that had been there the day he first opened them after the coma. Through all the darkness, they had found each other. Through all the uncertainty, they had held fast to hope. And now, surrounded by the family they had built together, they were living the happy ending that had once seemed impossible. Or rather, Naomi thought as Ethan joined her and their children, not an ending at all, but the most beautiful beginning. Around town, people still sometimes talked about the unlikely love story of the billionaire and the nanny. How she had stayed when everyone else had given up hope. How he had fought his way back from the brink for the son he adored and the woman who had believed in him. They called it a modern fairy tale, a story of commitment in a world where such things seemed increasingly rare. A reminder that sometimes, when everything seems lost, the greatest gifts are waiting to be found. But to those who knew them best, to Oliver, who had gained not just a mother but a stronger father, to Victor, who had found his own courage through his brother's struggle, even to Elaine, who had learned it was never too late to open her heart, the story of Ethan and Naomi Sinclair was something simpler and more profound. It was proof that true love doesn't always arrive in expected packages. Sometimes it comes disguised as a job interview or a second chance, or a tragedy that forces us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to recognize it, to fight for it, to believe in it, even when all evidence suggests we should give up hope, it transforms us in ways we never imagined possible. For Ethan and Naomi, that transformation had begun the moment she stepped through his door and into his son's life. Ed had deepened through the darkest hours of his coma, strengthened during his grueling recovery, and blossomed into the kind of love that sustains families through generations. A love built on more than passion or convenience. A love forged in sacrifice and commitment. A love that had been tested by fire and emerged unbreakable as they settled into their life together, raising their children, building their dreams, creating memories to replace what had been lost. They never forgot how close they had come to missing each other entirely, how many small decisions and chances had led them to where they were. And every night before they slept, they whispered the same words to each other. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for never giving up." Because in the end, that was the truest magic of their story. Not that a wealthy man had fallen for his son's caretaker, or that a patient had awakened against the odds, but that two people had recognized in each other the missing pieces of their hearts and had been brave enough to reach across the divide of class, of circumstance, of tragedy, to create something beautiful together. Something that would last long after their story was forgotten by the wider world. Something their children and their children's children would carry forward as their most precious inheritance. The knowledge that sometimes love is worth every risk, that family can be found in the most unexpected places, and that even in our darkest moments when all seems lost, the light of hope can guide us home, if only we have the courage to follow where it leads. For Ethan and Naomi Sinclair, it had led them to each other, and that had made all the difference. The end.